Hardcore is dead, softcore is here, and it's actually pretty fun. But Tarkov is a strange game, and despite the experience of being in raid not being that much different, the philosophy of the game outside the game has totally flipped on its head. So what happened? Well, the game has changed in a few ways that you might not expect based on the changes that BSG has made. The flea market has been completely reopened, and this to me is the biggest change by far, but it interacts with the other two big changes that have been put in for softcore, the first one being that the weight system has practically been removed and the fact that there is more loot everywhere. This was written kind of strangely on the softcore balancing changes, but this section basically means that the weight system is gone and that there's more stashes and duffel bags and that kind of thing on every location. So let's start with the flea market. You can buy pretty much anything on the flea now, and it really is pretty much anything. Prestige armbands, any kind of ammo, red flares, class 6 armor, Tagilla face shields, thick items cases, even Lega medals from Arena, you name it, you can pretty much buy it. One of the only exceptions is secure containers, but basically anything else goes. Then, with 5 slots as a base, you can churn through a large number of items, and this has made the flea market much more lively. Even when we had the very limited flea opening in the hardcore wipe, because people could only put up one item at a time, it was kind of boring to use the flea market, so a lot of people just didn't bother. Most of the items were really expensive, and there wasn't actually much choice. But with these changes, you can really list a lot of stuff, and it makes the flea market much more enjoyable to use, especially with some of the quality of life features that we've had recently, like the quick listing in the menu. However, just because you can buy everything doesn't mean that you're going to be able to afford it. As you might expect, the good stuff costs quite a bit of money, especially top-end ammo. So this means that you then want to go into raid to go and collect items to go to sell them on the flea to be able to afford these things. Until recently, I find myself not really focusing on money at all, especially this wipe, because a lot of the stuff you just couldn't buy and had to go and find these things in raid yourself, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, it's just a completely different change mentally as to how we think about and play the game. So we want to loot, and this is where the weight system change comes in. You can now carry an enormous amount of stuff. A 50% weight increase, just for context, is like having a mule activated at all times. And by the way, you can still take another mule if you want to. And the changes that they made to inertia mean that you can move when you are seriously overweight, basically as if you weren't encumbered. In this clip here, I'm holding a tank battery and 2 propane cans, and as you can see, my weight is over 82 kilograms, but when we go to test out the movement, it doesn't actually feel that bad. We're a few notches down on the walking, but it's as if I'm carrying maybe 45 to 50 kilograms normally before these changes came through. Now, BSG have written this down as an inertia change, but the base inertia seems about the same. It's just that it doesn't get any worse as you get absolutely juiced. Also, there are more loot containers all over the place, and you want to search them as taking the stuff doesn't cause you maneuverability issues later. Especially as a wipe continues, a lot of the time I just kind of stop looting because I've got enough money from the hideout or the flea market or whatever it might be, and picking up items in raid is actually probably only going to be to my detriment if I do actually meet someone. The same goes for PvP. You now feel like you can actually loot your kills, or at least want to try, because it's fully possible to carry out 2 players' kits without crawling along the floor like a scav at 3 AM after a night out on the Tarkovsky vodka. Case in point, I myself had a raid on Interchange recently after the changes and killed 2 players with another one left, and usually I just leave the stuff, but I really wanted to loot these guys, knowing that A, you can make so much money now from good PMC equipment, and B, that you can move whilst holding it and actually get to extract. If you get all of these things back to your stash, you can sell every single part of it to somebody else on the flea and make an actual fortune. One interesting quirk of BSG's changes coming right off the back of hardcore is that the secure container changes are the same as they were before. They did let you add cash in there previously, but meds and ammo are still banned. This means that if you kill somebody geared, you can take all of their ammo and relist it on the flea market, and if it's something good like M61 or M995 or heaven forbid 338 AP, this is probably one of the most valuable things that you can loot in raid at the moment. So obviously, all of this results in the old ruble meta, so you loot as much as you can, you turn it into rubles via the flea market, and then you buy whatever you like, up to and including the best items in the game. At this stage of the wipe, this is actually probably okay. But if you did this early on, we'd be back to the old problems. Meta gear by the end of week 1, experienced players clearing factory with Gen 4s and face shields that are listed on the flea market, and interestingly that's actually similar to how the start of this wipe went because BSG put too much gear accessible at the start, namely Tagilla, on factory at 100% spawn rate. This type of economy is predestined to inflate like crazy, but in a slightly nuanced way. Anything that is consumable, like meta ammo or classics plates, they tend to be really expensive and become even more expensive over time. And this is directly due to the value of rubles in Tarkov decreasing as the supply of rubles increases as players loot and sell stuff to the traders. However, those items that don't get removed from the system, like voodoo scopes or night vision, these become very cheap due to the insurance system. They're hardly ever removed from the game, and they either end up back with the original owner or taken out by another player, and mostly get used again or recycled to somebody else on the flea market. One quirk at the moment is that the Bitcoin farm is still in its hardcore wipe style and significantly nerfed, which has historically caused an outsized effect on the inflationary economy in EFT through to the sheer influx of cash it produces, but currently this isn't as much of a factor. I'm personally really torn because I actually like some hardcore mechanics, but I've had a lot of fun playing the softcore event so far as well, and it really feels to me like there is more player agency outside of the milsim playstyle and more styles that actually work. Want to be a loot goblin and hoard all the little bits to sell on the Flea to then build a good kit? Sure, there's a ton of boxes and you have enough slots on the Flea to make it work. Want to shift W Chad style around the map, killing players and taking kits and funding yourself that way? Sure, you can carry 2-player loadouts without being slowed down and make it to extract no problem. Want to play the flea market stock trading simulator and make a bunch of money without even going to raid? Sure, you can do that too, because anything goes. The flea market's open, you can relist anything that you buy off it, and fine in raid is removed. Want to actually start the wipe late and give it a try because you couldn't be bothered with hardcore? Also okay, just get to level 10 and you can now buy the best ammo in the game and go toe to toe with people who've been playing the whole wipe and are level 42 and beyond. On that last point, the softcore Flea is a great catch-up mechanic for those who haven't been grinding Tarkov like a job. In hardcore, it's practically impossible because with no Flea, you're purely gated behind trader levels and time spent in raid finding things. In principle, this is fine, and I understand that people want to be rewarded for the time that they spend, but the issue is that it really is an even steeper curve to try to get up if you're starting late when the game is in a more hardcore state. Given the changes that BSG have put in now, I feel that more loot and drastically reduced weight system are both probably actually fine, but the flea market needs to be done with more nuance. A gated flea that is closed for the first month-ish to preserve the early wipe feel, regular after that, so up to class 4 armor and 856A1 for the next couple of months, and then fully open at the end could actually be really good. Long-term thoughts on Tarkov aside, I actually didn't think the softcore event would go like this, and I don't think BSG have gone far enough. I thought it was going to be a crazy, no holds barred, anything goes kind of thing, which is true for the flea market, but it isn't really for some of the movement mechanics. Only a week ago, we had some changes to Arena around inertia, where the actual inertial movement of your character is basically gone. It's pretty much at the lowest it could possibly be without being removed entirely, and I thought that this system was going to come to the base game in EFT for the softcore wipe itself. As I said, the actual starting inertia in EFT main isn't really any different to how it was before. It's only as it scales as you carry more stuff. And the problem with this for me is that having the two games be different is actually kind of annoying. Ammo stats and things, yeah, that's probably alright. You can have PvP be more powerful in Arena and less powerful in the base game, and that might fiddle a little bit with the way that you think about it, but people wear different armors and different loadouts in Arena to the base game anyway. Even things like changes to ADS speed and stuff, that just means that the guns perform slightly nicer in Arena, and you have to make up for it with a bit of extra ergo in the base game. But lots of different guns handle differently anyway, but mechanically for the movement, I'm not sure if this is a good idea. Inertia right now is totally different between the two games. You have to circle strafe in the base Tarkov if you actually want to peek out, but you don't have to do this in Arena. The slide stop has been removed in Arena, but not in the base game, and I really think that they should do this. You can ADS out of sprint in Arena as well, but again, not in the base game. Unfortunately, this devalues Arena's use as a warm-up, and because the two games are diverging further from each other, at some point I think people might consider that it's not worth it, because you might get into bad habits in Arena that will end up getting you killed in Tarkov itself. Fighting in Arena is already only probably about 20% of combat in EFT, as it focuses on one specific aspect of fighting another player when you're both fully aware of each other, which is just one of the many scenarios in the base game. But now that the mechanical skills that you need are slightly different as well, this might be too much for some people to be useful at this stage. It seems like the approach BSG are going for is actually testing systems for 1.0, where I thought the softcore event was going to be kind of a full-bore old-style Tarkov, and this just doesn't seem to be the case. The other piece that I really think needs to be changed for the softcore event is the RMT restrictions that needs to be rolled back, and in particular cases. Why shouldn't we be able to bring a scav junk box into raid? So much of this stuff was to combat cheaters, bringing in huge cases and filling them full of things and then selling items for RMT, but that ship has just kind of sailed at this point, and especially for the softcore event, we really should be able to do it. This really came to a head because BSG added cases back to mark rooms, which again were removed for this precise reason, but people got to the mark rooms and initially they couldn't pick them up because you weren't allowed to hold the case on a PMC, even though it was down there on the floor. I think BSG should remove all of these restrictions. If you want to go into raid with a thick items case and 3 scav junk boxes or whatever it is, I think you should be able to do it. Most people won't, but the fact you are able to do it puts that ceiling on Tarkov's risk reward to a level that makes the game really enticing. I personally find it exciting to see thick items cases back on the Flea. It gives me that feeling back when I first started thinking, how could somebody ever make 11 million rubles and buy one of these things? And eventually over time when you play, you figure it out. With the restrictions that have happened over the years, the ceiling of Tarkov has been reduced lower and lower, and it makes you think, well, what am I really striving for? So I think that they should bring that stuff back for sure. Along with it, they should get rid of a lot of the other stuff too, things like having multiple rare items of the same type not being allowed, like bitcoins, or not being able to stack certain bags in other bags. I just think they should remove all of that stuff because it's really, really annoying. I'd personally love to see some of the best players in the game making content, taking in thick items cases into labs and filling them up. That would definitely be like the good old days. And again, as I said, just to know it's possible makes Tarkov that much more exciting. So in short, softcore is fun. I know it's not for everybody, and there's a milsim portion of the community that really doesn't like this direction for the game, but I think for the average player, softcore is more enjoyable than hardcore, and players voted with their feet this wipe and proved that that was the case. I just hope that BSG can take both of these things that we're doing right now, hardcore and then softcore, and get a good combination of these elements for 1.0 so we can have something balanced that feels a little bit like the Tarkov that we've had recently, but with the top end taken off and some of the more stupid things removed. So as usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.